thank you all for being with us here today. My name's Tegan Enloe. I am a licensed realtor in Oregon, and I am representing the Enloe Group tonight. We have agents licensed in Oregon and Washington, and we're just really excited to be partnering with Kahren and Ivory to talk about credit reports. I can't even tell you how many times I'll be talking to someone about their plans for buying a house now or in the future, and they say, well, that's something that I'm working towards, but I need to work on my credit report first or my credit score. But a lot of us don't really know a whole lot about how your credit scores are put together, what impacts it the most, where is kind of the sweet spot for where you need to target to be at when you are ready to buy. So that's why I wanted to bring in our experts tonight so that they could kind of debunk some of those myths, tell us what we should be doing, let us know what sort of tools they have available so you can really see here's what I do need to do to be able to get to that place. So, thank you guys so much for being here tonight and for sharing your knowledge with all of us. Um, if anyone has any questions during the presentation, please feel free to ask them. I can read anything that you send during chat and ask the group, or you can speak up if you want to, or if you want to have something asked anonymously, you can send that to me as well and just let me know you want it as anonymous, and I will pose the question that way. So, with that, I don't know, Ivory or Karin, which one of you wants to get started, but go ahead.
All right, I'll go ahead and get started because I'm going to go ahead and bring up the presentation. We'll start off just making sure everybody can see what I'm sharing on my screen, because if we're missing that, we've got an issue. So we'll start there. All right.
And I love an interactive presentation and conversation. So if you guys have questions, like feel free to show your faces and, participate if you're comfortable. And, like Tegan said, definitely if you'd like to ask anything anonymously, that is fair game as well.
Okay. Everyone can see my screen, right?
Yeah.
First things first. Okay, perfect. Thank you for joining us today. Karin and I are going to start off by explaining a little bit about us, but like she said, please ask questions. We want you to walk away today finding this beneficial and helpful in every way possible. And the questions that you ask will be able to help us tailor the materials today so it makes sense for you specifically. All right. And then I'm going to go ahead and we'll move on. So Karin, I'll let you start. Why don't you introduce yourself first?
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for being here. My name is Kahren Oxner, and I run UMortgage for the Pacific Northwest in our area. So I've been in the mortgage industry for 23 years. I can't even believe that. I was thinking the other day that I've actually been in the mortgage industry for longer, like more than half of my life, which is kind of mind-boggling, but I love it. I'm super passionate about home ownership and helping people build wealth through home ownership. And I'm really excited to be here today because credit is such a huge and important piece of that puzzle. So welcome you guys, and thanks for tuning in. And if you have, like I said, any questions during or want to, connect with us after, I love teaching and educating and really helping people, feel empowered on the path to home ownership. So thanks for being here.
And my name is Ivory Becker. So I'm the owner and the founder of Incite Strategies Credit Repair, as well as the co-founder of Credit Score Pro AI. We specialize in credit repair, credit education, and really just making sure that everybody understands credit, whether they're a professional or really everyone, right? We're not taught about credit when we're in school, and there's not a lot of resources out there to help people. My background is in lending, credit repair. I've been in financial planning as well, and regulatory compliance. So a lot of really fun
Riveting stuff.
Yeah, riveting stuff. Lots of laws and regulations, and that's what we deal with every day. So yeah, but that's why I am in the credit space. Karin and I share the same goal. We want to make sure we're able to help people get to home ownership, and the same with Tegan and all of her team. Okay. So after today, we expect you to be able to understand your credit options, understand how credit impacts the home buying process, and the steps you can take to establish and improve your credit. And depending on some of the questions we get today, if we're not able to get to some of them, we do hope that we'll be able to expand on some of these topics in more depth, because today we have a limited amount of time. So the problem is there is no life lesson on credit and home buying. And we thought we'd start with sharing some of the common misconceptions. And I'm not going to get into any of these misconceptions now, because during everything we're going to look at over the next hour, we're really going to dive in more depth on each of these myths. So myth number 1, checking your credit score lowers it. And that's you checking your own credit score. Myth number 2, you only have one credit score. Myth number 3, a higher income means a higher credit score. Myth number 4, carrying a balance on a credit card boosts your score. Myth number 5, closing old accounts improves your scores.
And I think we could probably all add a ton to those myths, because there is just so much misinformation out there about credit. And what Ivory kind of alluded to is there's not like a class that you go through in high school or even college that talks about credit, building it, improving it, fixing it. And, you know, if you didn't come from families where that was something that was discussed, you know, there's just nothing out there. So we really want to demystify some of these myths and give you guys some actionable tools to, you know, really feel like you know how to move forward in, you know, kind of accomplishing some of these goals. So I think some of these next slides are super interesting just with regards to, you know, facts regarding credit.
Yeah, exactly. We thought it'd be interesting. These are some of the things that nobody really talks about. So there's 19 million adults that lack a credit score, and that's called being credit invisible. A lot of these individuals are those that are afraid of utilizing credit. And part of this category is also the elderly individuals who no longer use credit anymore.
And I think also within that bucket are people that have been told that, you know, they need to use cash for everything.
Right.
And they think that they've got an excellent credit rating because they use cash for everything. And that's an interesting misconception as well that we'll get into here in a little bit.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And 37% of adults have a credit score below 700. I think it's very important to bring this up because often when we're facing credit troubles, we feel like we're alone and that we're the minority. 37% is a lot of adults across the US. And 16% have a credit score below 579. Now, just for fun, what state do you think has the lowest credit score overall, the lowest average credit score? Just for fun, go ahead and type in the chat or shout it out.
In the comments.
Do we have any guesses?
Vegas, wherever, Nevada.
Nevada, okay, Nevada.
Yeah,
Nevada as a guess.
Get there real quick.
Yeah, you can go and get there real fast. Oregon, okay. Come on, we got to have more than 2 guesses. We promised engagement. This is the easiest engagement.
Yeah, this is easy. There's no wrong answers here. It's the one that's the most fun to spell, if that helps.
Yeah, that's a good clue.
Mississippi.
It is Mississippi. Yes, so Mississippi is the state with the lowest average credit score. And what do you, oh, I'm getting ahead of myself. So 22% of adults have a credit score above 800. And I thought I'd share some fun facts about those types of individuals that are above that 800. They happen to have more credit cards than the average American. So they have about 6 credit cards compared to the average American having 4. But the key is their balance on their credit cards is very low compared to the rest of the public. The average balance is only $2,500. And they have higher loan balances. And this is typically because of a mortgage. So to get to that 800 plus zone, you typically do need to have a mortgage. It's considered a responsible type of debt. And they have no delinquent payments that would show up on the credit report. The average American has 2 delinquent payments on their credit report. And 1.2% of adults have a perfect credit score. So that is essentially, let me look at the generations. So that's primarily Gen X. And then younger Americans, so Gen Z and millennials make up 4% of that 1.2%, if you can follow that. And then Gen Z is 0.1%. So as you age, your credit tends to improve. And that's just because of longevity, which we're going to dive into a bit further as well.
That's actually a funny aside. The people that have had the absolute best credit of any people I've ever worked with in my entire 23-year career happen to be Gary and Sarah Oxner, and they're 76. And I'm like, how the heck do you guys have such perfect credit? And they're like, well, we've had credit for a long time, Kahren. So it's so funny that it's true.
So along the lines of what we were talking about before, what state do you think has the highest credit score? The highest average credit score?
This one shocked me. I don't know why, but.
Mm-hmm.
Is it California?
Nope. Not California. I will be amazed if anyone comes up with this one.
I know.
It surprised me.
Do you know why this is?
No, I wish they gave us why. Not Florida. Nope, not Florida. It's a state that you forget about.
Like
Okay.
Vermont?
Vermont. Oh, I do forget about Vermont, but it's not Vermont.
That's a good guess.
Rhode Island?
Rhode Island, no. Wrong part of the country.
All
Not
right,
on the
tell
east.
them.
Wrong part.
Okay, it's Minnesota.
Go figure.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. Minnesota. Average credit score for the residents of Minnesota is 742.
The real important takeaway though for this is that I think people are really afraid to talk about credit because, like Ivory alluded to, they think they're the only ones that have some, blemishes or some challenges, but it is very common and it's something not to be ashamed of or to hide from. Like, let's tackle it together, and you're not alone. So I think that's really important takeaway from this conversation for sure.
Yes, absolutely. We work with people from every background, every type of life you could ever imagine. And credit is something that impacts every single person because we all go through different highs and lows in life. And our credit is impacted by those things. So buying a home is the first step to building wealth. And I thought, Kahren, you'd be the best person to talk more about this.
And I go back to my personal situation, which is why I'm so passionate about it. And I like to share the story. When I was 21 years old, I bought my first home. Everyone in my life thought I was insane. I was, really driven. I really, really wanted to become a homeowner. And I don't even think I fully understood like the why behind it. Certainly not the magnitude. I was fortunate enough to, grow up in a family where we kind of did start talking about credit in a relatively younger. So I had built some decent credit, by the time I graduated from college and, was out there in the world. So I bought my first home when I was 21 years old, owned it for 3 years, did whatever I needed to do to make that payment. I had a roommate that I literally found on Craigslist. It's a miracle that I'm not, murdered, but that was actually turned out to be a really good thing. Don't find a roommate on Craigslist these days anymore. That was a long time ago. But when I sold that house 3 years later, I net profited $80,000 from the sale. I don't know many 25-year-olds today that can save $80,000, let alone 20 years ago. So it is the single most important thing that you can do for your financial future, for your family, for you to build your net worth, and for you to really just improve so much in your life. So I became passionate about homeownership as early as possible. I want people to get started as soon as they possibly can, because of what it does for your financial future. Statistically, households that are owners versus households that are renters have 43 times more wealth than those who rent. So it really is the single most important thing that you can do for yourself and your family to create opportunity, to build wealth, to have something for your future. So we are both super passionate about homeownership, and that's why I'm so excited that you guys are here taking this class with us, because building great credit is one thing that you can do to help you from that perspective. So super important. And yeah, that's how I feel about homeownership and building wealth.
So, Kahren, how often do you hear, or I mean, even you, Tegan, I can't buy because of my credit?
All the time, and that's why this information is so important, because people don't know. They don't really know what that even means, but they are concerned because they've maybe had a late, or I've talked to people that think they have, late payments because they were 2 or 3 days late. And we know that it doesn't get, posted to the credit bureaus for, in that amount of time. So there's just a lot of misinformation out there, and knowing about credit, accessing your credit, and then working with professionals to really get those answers is critical.
And I think the key here is you don't need the perfect credit score to buy a home.
Yep.
There are various options available for you based on different credit scores and where you're at. We'll
Definitely.
talk a little bit about that.
Definitely. So it's really important to get this information as early in the process as possible. And I talk to people all the time that don't feel that they're ready. But the one thing about credit that is really important is the more time you have to work on your credit, to build your credit, to improve your credit, the more, the more it can be impacted over that time frame. So if you wanted to work on your credit today and buy a house in 30 days, you might not have enough time to really make a big enough impact on your credit to have the score or the history involved improve to a point where it would actually help you from a lending perspective. But if you've got 6 to 12 months, there is so much we can do in that time that will really put you in the best possible position, because the better your credit is, both from a score perspective and from a content perspective, the more options you have with regards to lending. So better options for programs, so you're not as limited. Also better rates and fees, because everything in the lending world is based on your risk profile, and someone that has healthier credit is looked at to be a lower risk. It doesn't mean that you have to have perfect credit to get a loan. It just means that you might be in a little bit of a riskier category for lending, and that might impact what we can do for you from, a pricing or product or fee perspective. So the sooner you start working with someone to identify anything that you can do to improve your situation, the better. So time is on your side for sure when it comes to building credit and working on it. So definitely engage as early as possible for the best outcome. Is this my slide or your slide, Ms. Ivory?
Your slide.
This is my slide. I love it. So in terms of, let's see, I think I went over most of these things that I wanted to talk about.
I think you did too. I should have just gone forward. Let's see. You did. Yeah.
Cool.
So especially, I suppose, in a changing interest rate environment as well, if you are looking to refinance later, having good credit is just going to put you in an even better position. So I think that's the only point we missed. One of the other factors to consider is that some creditors are looking at other financial indicators, not just your credit scores. So lenders are looking at things like public records, tax liens. If you have any outstanding judgments, that's something you're going to want to take care of, or at least begin working towards a resolution and have some sort of a payment plan in place. Those can cause either a pause in the lending process or a delay in the lending process. Outside of specifically home loans, some creditors like credit card companies may also decline you if you have too many inquiries. So let's say you just go on a spree of applying for every credit card because you want to see who's going to approve you. If you're applying for too many cards, it can be seen as risky behavior. So that could adversely impact you. And then there are other reporting systems. For example, there's rental reporting systems, and there's actually 62 different reporting bureaus that gather data. They gather all your information from personal information like prior names, public records, prior addresses, all the way to things like your rental payment history, utility bill history, your history with deposit accounts like checking accounts and savings accounts. Goodness, I lost the word. So it's important just to understand there are different types of bureaus out there. So when you're applying for credit, if you do not have a lot of credit history, sometimes with other lending opportunities, they can rely on these other bureaus. Okay. So let's dive into the meat and potatoes of looking into the credit side of things. So what is the point of a credit score? Really, the point of the credit score is to show whether you have the ability to pay creditors responsibly. Now, what's really important to understand is this is always moving. So your credit score lives with you. This means let's say you've had some blemishes in the past, as you start to show on-time payments, your credit score is going to recover. It's going to improve with the added positive payment history. So you're not going to be impacted forever from negative information on your report. So another way to look at your credit score is it's looking at your credit worthiness. And it's ranking that next to your peers, essentially saying if you have a higher credit score, you are less risk to lend to. And if you have a lower credit score, there may be more risk, but it doesn't mean you have no opportunities at all. So another important thing to know when it comes to looking at your credit report is if you've ever pulled your reports between Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion, you may have noticed that your credit scores are different. Has anybody ever noticed that before? Okay, I see some people shaking their
Absolutely.
heads. Yeah, so some of that is for the reason of creditors not reporting to all three bureaus. So a creditor can choose to report to one or three or not even all of the bureaus. We recently had someone referred our way who thought they had sufficient credit history because they had several products with a small, tiny credit union. And unfortunately, that credit union did not report to the bureaus. So that meant that their 2 auto loans, their credit card, and they had another, I can't remember what the other account was, but that fourth account gave them no credit history, and they ended up not having any credit score at all. So it is not mandatory for a creditor to report to the bureau, but that can lead to some of those differences that you see.
And the reason why, I'll just add one thing really quick, Ivory. The reason why is that it costs money to do so.
Yep.
So if they want to spend less money, they may only report to one bureau. So that's the reason why, but it costs money anytime a creditor reports to one or all three of the bureaus. So that's why sometimes they don't do all three or don't do it at all.
Right. They're paying to report. So for them, if like, let's say it's a collection account, they report only to one bureau, to them, that's still leverage because they're still reporting information to one bureau and they know there's an impact there. Did we have a question that I missed? I think someone started to say something. Okay. Okay, so let's dive into what actually makes up the credit score. So I want to start with the score ranges. Most credit scores fall between 300 and 850. Most of the time, excuse me, most of the time, the lowest credit score you're going to see is around the 400s. Even though most algorithms begin at 300 or 350, it's pretty much impossible to see a score at that point because you're building from the 300. So what's considered excellent scores is anywhere from the 780 onwards, and even 740 is considered very good. I want to pause and show you that 780, that doesn't mean you have to have a perfect credit score to qualify for the best interest rates. So oftentimes people will hyper focus on getting that 800 or that 850, but even if you can manage to get to the high 700s, you're going to benefit from things the exact same way as someone with an 800 or an 850 credit score.
And this is a really good graphic from a mortgage lending perspective on conventional loans specifically. So those are kind of the credit tier bands that we look at as lenders to risk-based price things. And that's going to sound really confusing, but essentially, if you're in that top excellent band, from a credit perspective, you're going to get the best possible interest rate and fee. And then it slightly adjusts. It's not terrible, but it slightly adjusts, towards the other bands. Now, interestingly enough, there are other loan programs that are a little bit more forgiving and more, I guess, broad, I would say, with regards to those credit bands. So for example, you know, an FHA loan, anything from that orange band and above is going to be priced almost identically. So that's, you know, kind of an interesting way to look at it. So it's not that you can have worse credit necessarily on FHA, but it's just a little bit more forgiving and broad from, you know, how it breaks down those ranges.
Okay, so let's look into the factors. These are the components that actually drive that number you see when it comes to your credit score. So the biggest and most impactful piece is your payment history. This makes up 35% of your credit score. Now, payment history is looking at the obvious, right? Do you make your payments on time? Have you had some credit blemishes? Some of the important things to know about payment history is positive payment history stays on your report for 10 years. So if you close an account and it's been 10 years since it's closed, it will fall off of your credit report. And negative payment history impacts you for 7 years, with the exception of bankruptcies. Certain bankruptcies are on your credit report for 10 years. Amounts owed is really looking at credit utilization. Here's a really important thing to know about credit utilization. It is heavily focused on your credit cards. The only time you're really going to see an adverse impact from a loan on the utilization is when you owe more than the original loan amount. So typically we'll see this with things like student loans, for example. Maybe you borrowed 30,000, but you owe 40,000 now.
And
But
that's
it's
really
still
important.
minimal. Yeah,
That's
go ahead.
really important just to explain, like, for example, when you get a new home loan, that home loan balance is going to remain pretty well at, you know, it's going to stay up there at the amount that you originally financed for quite a while, and it just stair steps down very, very slowly. So that's why that's so important, is that doesn't negatively impact you, meaning you're at like maxed out on your home loan, if you will.
No. Paying loans off in accordance with the terms is all you need to do. Paying loans off more aggressively does not help your credit score. If your goal is to pay the loan off more aggressively because you want to pay less interest or you don't want the debt, that's fine. But just know it's not going to have a positive impact on your credit. It's really those credit cards you want to focus on, making sure you're maintaining low utilization, ideally not carrying any more than 1 to 9% of the utilization on a credit card. We certainly don't want to be carrying balances because, again, second biggest factor at 30%, it can be a pretty heavy impact to your credit score. If you're someone who pays your cards off each and every month, depending on the date that your creditor sends information to the credit bureau, because that is only once per month, you may report a high balance 1 month and you could see your credit score drop. And then the next month, if it's reporting no balance, you'll see your credit score recover. So if you're someone who sees your scores yo-yo and you know you are using your cards, maxing them out, paying them off, maxing them out, paying it off, that's likely the reason behind that.
That's really important.
Yeah. The next factor is the length of your credit history. So length of credit history, super important thing to know is it only focuses on open accounts. So it's the average age of open accounts on your credit report. So has anyone here ever closed a loan or a credit card and seen their scores just plummet?
I've had clients do it thinking that they're doing a good thing because they're, you know, and I'm like, no, don't do that.
So what that's done,
when I paid my truck off, my score dropped 60 points initially.
Yeah, and that's from that average age of open accounts, right? Or that length of credit history. Because that account was now closed, it resets, it readjusts the average age. If you have limited credit history or that was one of your oldest accounts, it can have such a big impact on your credit score. So one of the ways to counteract this, because obviously we're not going to pay loans forever, we want to pay them off, is to have an open and active credit card. So open and active credit cards are kind of the secret to maintaining a high credit score long term because they impact so many areas of your credit report. They're impacting that payment history, they're impacting utilization, they're impacting your length of credit history. So you've just got, and they're impacting credit mix, which we haven't even talked about yet. So those types of accounts can really be game changers if you're trying to maintain a strong credit score. Now, you do want to use that credit card once every 3 to 6 months. That way it keeps impacting your credit score, because only remember active accounts, right? So if it becomes stale, if you're not using it, it is not going to help influence your credit score algorithm. So we usually recommend, maybe put your Netflix on auto pay on it and pay that off every month if you're someone who is adverse to using credit cards. So
I got a question.
sure.
So instead of paying my truck off, would it have almost been smarter to refinance it and just make $100 payments a month instead of paying it off?
So if you refinance it, you're actually creating a new loan. So it'd have the
Oh,
same end result. So that's why the
okay.
credit cards are really that key point, because if you have a credit card and you just keep it open and keep it open and keep it open, I mean, that thing eventually 20 years old, 30 years old. That's how the Oxners probably maintain their super high credit score.
That's exactly
So-
right.
That makes sense. Okay.
Well, and I've actually had clients say to me before, they've got an auto loan and maybe they only have, a couple $1,000s left on it. And they're like, oh, I can pay my car loan off right away. No worries. And I'm like, no, please don't do that, because you have a perfect payment history on that auto loan and you've actually had it for 6 years. So it's a nice, long, healthy trade line that's actually, improving your score. So paying it off and having that, then be a closed account might actually be a detriment. So definitely chat with your, with me or Ivory or your loan officer, or credit repair specialist before you do that, because it actually could, credit is not an intuitive thing. So make sure that you're asking those questions prior to taking action, because something that you think might be really helpful and really good might have the opposite effect.
Yep.
Credit is definitely not something that makes logical sense on the surface. It's all about the data. But one of the things, like, let's say you are talking with Kahren and you have a higher debt to income ratio, meaning you need to have less debt showing. If that car loan does only have $2,000 left and it would help the mortgage, typically Karen's going to recommend you pay it off as part of the closing. So that way she doesn't have to count that debt against you in the lending process, but also it's not going to impact your credit score negatively. So you get the best of both worlds. You get rid of that payment, you help that debt to income ratio that she needs, and you maintain a strong credit score while you're getting the mortgage.
That's exactly right. And anybody that tells you to do that in advance, definitely I would ask those questions.
So, okay. The last two categories, new credit and credit mix. I'm going to start with credit mix first. So credit mix is really looking at the blend of the different types of accounts on your credit report. It wants to see that no matter what kind of debt you have, you're able to pay it responsibly. So it wants to know you can be successful at paying credit cards responsibly, as well as loans. So somebody who doesn't have a mixture of different types of accounts on their credit report, they're going to be lacking in this category, meaning they can't get to that perfect credit score. Those are the scenarios where you have someone who has credit history of only credit cards. They have a great score. They go to apply for a car loan and they're denied because they have no loan history in the past, right? They may have a great credit score, but they're missing that credit mix category. So nowadays, there's a lot of ways to influence this, which we'll talk about a bit later, without having to take out debt unnecessarily. And the last category is new credit. So new credit, and we can add to it inquiries. So this is really looking at your applications for debt as well as recently opened accounts. Until you start to build some payments on recently opened accounts, there's this kind of a holding the breath to make sure that you can make the payments on time, right? It's a little bit of risk until the credit score algorithm knows that you can pay the debt. But inquiries is really just looking at your applications, obviously, for debt. If you have a ton of inquiries, it could signal financial trouble, which is why the inquiries category has a minor impact to the score. I want to emphasize minor. So you are allowed 4 inquiries per bureau per year with no impact to your credit score. These are some important tips about inquiries. The other important factor is when you apply for a mortgage, that inquiry is not impacting your score for 30 days, okay? After that 30 days, it will impact your score. But you can also do what's called shopping around. And shopping around applies to mortgages. It applies to auto loans as well, and then student loans. So if you've ever gone to a dealership and you applied for an auto loan and you see 20 inquiries on your credit report and you panic and you're like, oh my God, I got 20 inquiries. You got 20 attempts to look at your pricing for different lenders, but it's only one inquiry. So it only impacts you like one inquiry. So you can breathe, you can feel okay. They didn't screw you over.
Well, and the nice thing that we like to do as well is a soft pull to credit, which is something that we do often, which allows us to kind of take a peek behind the curtain to see what's going on, see what your debts are, see a little bit about your scoring, but it doesn't even count as a hard inquiry.
Correct.
Because you're not ready to actually make a buying decision. So we always start, me and my team always start with a soft pull so that there's zero impact. Because when people are getting pre-approved in a market like this, you might start with me and not actually close on a home for 6 months. So I want to make sure that I'm accessing your credit one time when I need it and not dinging it multiple times over multiple months. So that's the strategy that we employ to help, minimize the impact and then take a look at what we've got. The other thing that allows us to do, which I've talked to a few of you on this call about, is that it allows us to help you opt out. Because the credit bureaus, unfortunately, are famous for selling client data and personal information, and maintaining the integrity of your personal information and your data is one of the most important things that you and that I can do to keep you safe. So we always help our clients opt out so that is less of a potential. Just data integrity is so important right now, and there are lots of scammers and lots of issues. So I know Tegan talks to her clients about that regularly, because there's so much that we can do as an industry to try to keep people safe. That is huge when it comes to credit. So very important.
Yeah. So I think that's important to bring up. A hard inquiry is a true application for debt. So soft inquiry is not considered an application for debt. You will see it on your credit report, but it does not hurt your score. Now, if you are monitoring your credit, because I have to go back to the myths, that myth number one, if you are monitoring your own credit, that is not a soft inquiry or a hard inquiry. It's considered an educational review of your credit. So it has no impact on your score. You can't even see it on your credit report. So don't worry about credit monitoring. It's good to monitor your credit. It's important to monitor your credit, and it does not adversely impact your score. Okay. So because I'm so long-winded, I'm going to try to go through this one a little bit faster. So one of the things that often comes up for, I think, all of us in the lending space is, why does the credit score I see on my end not match the score that you pulled? And the
That's probably the
answer,
number one question I get.
right? And the answer is because there's actually multiple credit score algorithms. So you have what's called a FICO credit score. The FICO credit score is the standard. So if you were to go to Experian.com or Equifax.com or TransUnion.com, that is a FICO credit score. If you were to look on an app like Credit Karma and pretty much any other free app to access your credit, that is what's known as a Vantage score. Those are different credit score models. This means they look at the things like, if I go, I went too far. If I go back here to the payment history, utilization, all of that, they look at these factors differently. They're not weighted the same. Certain categories are a higher percentage on the Vantage score than they are the FICO score. This means that you have a different credit score. Beyond the percentages being different, there are some very specific differences that cause this information to be interpreted differently. So I'll give you an example so it actually makes sense. A paid collection helps your Vantage score. It makes it higher. It does not make your FICO credit score higher, right? So you may get a false sense of security if you're using Credit Karma thinking your score is higher when it's not. The opposite can be true as well. You could have a higher FICO score than a Vantage score, right? Because the information is being looked at differently. Now I'm going to blow your mind even further. There's different versions of that FICO credit score. So we have, you know, as time goes by, what determines a risky or a less risky consumer changes, right? Most consumers have credit card debt now, or have credit cards. In the past, people barely even used credit cards. It was a new concept, right? People have higher mortgage balances now than they did in the past. Personal loans are more common now than they were in the past, right? So they have to adjust the algorithms over time. So because they release new versions of the FICO credit score, you have multiple versions. You have a version 3, a version 8, a version 9, etc., right? In mortgage lending, they're using an older version. When you go to apply for an auto loan, they're using a different version, right? So you actually have multiple FICO credit scores and you have multiple Vantage credit scores. This is why it can be so confusing. But if you're maintaining the main principles we talked about here, and you're focusing on these aspects, no matter what version of the credit score is being used, you're going to have a high score. They just may be within 10 to 20 points of each other. And it may be a tighter range, just depending on where you're at. So rule of thumb, if you're following the points we discussed and then more of the points we're going to talk about later, no matter what versions used, you're going to fare very well. Any questions about any of that?
I just had a quick comment. I think one important thing that you said that I want to highlight on is, you know, paid collections.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, working with Ivory has been, you know, she's worth her weight in gold when it comes to like advising on those things. Don't just blindly pay off old collections thinking that you're, you know, doing the right thing to improve your credit score for,
Mm-hmm.
you know, the purposes of purchasing a home. Really make sure that you know that it's going to actually positively impact the home loan algorithm. So I've had clients, you know, have medical collections or, you know, just things that were very, very old that they said, gosh, you know, Kahren, I know that I need to get this stuff paid off. I'm just going to pay it off and take care of it. And I'm like, no, talk to Ivory first. Because she saved clients thousands of dollars in things that they didn't need to pay off and they shouldn't pay off, that they needed to work with her to get resolved, removed, adjusted, corrected, changed, that ended up saving overall thousands of dollars. So just a really important point as to why her counsel is so important.
Yeah, it's people often think that they have to pay the negative accounts. You don't necessarily. It's all about the laws, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Last 2023, it doesn't even feel like last year. It's been a few days, right? Last year, we were able to save our clients over $1,050,000 in collections, charge-offs, and repossessions that they didn't have to pay. That's all money they were able to put towards getting a mortgage. So don't feel obligated to pay. Don't rush and make a decision. It's better to make an informed decision, not a rushed decision. So.
Well, so much for getting through that slide quickly, huh? Sorry.
I tried. I'll do better.
I'll do better. That was really good information. I love it.
So if you're someone who doesn't have any credit at all, establishing credit can be as quick as 1 to 6 months. So I say as quick as 1 to 6 months, which sounds like a big range, simply because you do need 6 months of payment history on a credit report to generate a score. Now, there are ways to generate that are backward looking, but if those tools aren't available to you for your personal situation, then it would take up to 6 months. But in most cases, I would say we see credit scores within about 1 to 2 months. Lenders do have options for those with limited credit history, some non-traditional ways to look at credit, if you will. And then in the credit repair industry, we of course have plans for establishing credit. Now, if you're somebody who just wants to go see what those credit building options are, I do have on this slide, you can visit us at creditscorepro.ai or incitestrategies.credit. We have a ton of credit building options on there. But to give you a sneak peek of some of the things you can do, you can become an authorized user on a spouse or family member's credit card and add their credit history to your report. You can open a starter credit card. I missed the word card, a starter credit card account. So these are credit cards that are for people with no credit. Or you can do a secured credit card. You're putting down a deposit to gain access to a line of credit. You can add your utility bills, your subscription services to your credit report. We have tools that add your debit card to your credit report. And then we also have savings accounts that report like loans on your credit report. So all that's on our website. So remember, use credit responsibly. You do want to monitor your credit. We have those resources on the website too. So that way you know when the score is there. You know, what's the point of building your credit if you don't know if you have a score or not? So
Based on the right algorithm too, that's important.
yeah.
Not Credit Karma.
No, exactly. So let's talk about some effective credit management strategies. One, monitor your credit. How do you know where you're at if you have no barometer? So you have to have a starting point. You have to know where you're starting so you know how your score is impacted by different activities. So one of the best things you can do is watch what's causing your score to go up and down. It gives you an understanding more than just reading about something or watching videos on social media. Number two, pay your bills on time. If you struggle with paying things on time, and I know it sounds silly to say pay your bills on time, I would recommend just setting up auto pay for the minimum payments. By doing that, you're going to at least make sure everything is paid on time. I do understand sometimes if you are living paycheck to paycheck, that's easier said than done. It's important then that you make a budget and a strategy for what gets paid on what paycheck. It may be tedious, but it will be necessary so you can maintain your credit, because credit does not care about your income. Your income does not factor into your credit. You could make $30,000 a year and have an 800 credit score. You can make $1 million a year and have a 500 credit score. So the income itself doesn't matter, and credit is your tool to leverage. So you want to maintain it as best you can. And if you are struggling with payments, just contact your creditors and see if they have modification or assistance options, because those do not impact your credit. Okay, that was a tangent. Number three, maintain low utilization ratios. Pay off your credit cards. If you are somebody who has trouble with overusing your credit cards, again, only put one subscription service on it. Put your credit card in the freezer. You can't even use it, right? In a block of ice. That's what we tell people to do. It works because in the time it takes to thought, they've rationalized.
I saw that in what was that movie, Confessions of a Shopaholic? She actually,
oh, really?
Yeah, she actually freezes a credit card in that movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like, let me ask you this question. Isn't ice clear? Like, couldn't you still see the number if you needed to?
Well,
not
what if
super
you wrap
clearly.
it in something? I mean, it gets distorted though.
Yeah,
because
true.
of the ice.
There's a scene where she really wants to buy something and she's like hitting it with her stiletto heel, trying to chip the ice so she can get to it.
That's
Okay, that's hilarious. So yeah, maintain low utilization. It is in tiers. So if you're maxed out, if you get under 90%, you're going to see a little bump, under 75, a little bump, et cetera, right? It's important you pay one card down at a time. It's all about ratios. So if you have a $5,000 credit card that's maxed out and a $500 credit card that's maxed out, choose that $500 credit card first any day. Because again, it's all about 100% utilization versus 0% or 1 to 9%, right?
That's really important.
So yeah. Diversify your credit types. We talked about that. So utilize those credit building tools. And if you're not sure how to do that, I'm going to show you the resources on where you can go. That'll tell you how. Limit new credit inquiries. Apply for debt when it's necessary. Don't take the limit new inquiries as do not apply for debt. It is more important to put in multiple applications to get the best loan product for you than it is to worry about the 2 to 4 points you're going to impact your credit because of the inquiry.
And remember, you can get up to 4 each year. So don't be you don't need to be as conservative as you think.
Yeah. And you can shop around, remember? So that helps. And then number 6, review your report for errors and dispute negative items. Now, this is where we're going to start transitioning our conversation into how do you improve your credit if you do have negative information on your credit report. And that's exactly what this slide is saying. So perfect transition. So that is really when you're in the credit repair side of things. So it's exactly how it sounds. Credit repair is the process of improving your credit by specifically working to remove negative information from your credit report. So what we do specifically here at Incite Strategies is we're contacting credit bureaus, collection companies, and creditors with the goal of removing as much negative information as possible. This is anything from a 30-day late payment to a 120-day late payment, from charge-offs to collection accounts, to repossessions, really anything that is going to adversely impact your credit score. Even if you've paid those items off, they still hurt your score, whether that's a collection, a charge off, a repossession, etc. So when it comes to these negative accounts, it's not about whether you were late. It's not about whether you owed that debt. Okay. And that sounds very weird to hear. It's all about whether the laws and regulations are being adhered to. So it's about compliance, right? We go back to my old life in the banking industry. Are those laws and regulations being followed? If not, that's grounds for the information to be removed from your credit report. So you've got the Fair Credit Reporting Act that protects you as a consumer. I want to give you some examples here in the next slide of what can be removed and a little taste of how. So the very top one says mismatching information on bureau reports. We talked about the 3 credit bureaus, right? Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. Each of your creditors is sending the information to each bureau independently. The bureaus are not feeding information between each other, right? That's key. This means that there can be mismatching information across the 3. So a very common thing that we see is on a charged off account, maybe one bureau says it was for 5,000, another bureau says it was 7. Maybe one bureau says it was charged off in October of 2020 and the other bureau says it was December, right? That mismatching information is an issue. Those are errors on your credit report. Another extremely common one with late payments is mismatching months. Maybe one bureau shows you were late in August and the other 2 bureaus show September. Or maybe all 3 bureaus show September, but your statements show that you were late in August, right? Even though you were late in August, your statement will prove that you were on time in September when they marked you past due, right? So all of these are compliance issues. And that's how you get negative information off your credit report. Of course, they make it sound a lot easier than it is in practice. But the
Kind of
other
like in the
way,
court of law, like beyond a reasonable doubt, right? So
beyond a reasonable, yeah. Yeah, and actually that's a great lead in. So for things like collection accounts, there are requirements under the Fair Debt Collections Practices Act that essentially says that in order for that debt collection agency to collect on the debt, they must have validation, fancy word for proof. They must have proof that you owed that debt. That's going to be your original signed contract. That's going to be your payment history showing from when you were on time all the way till you were past due to the amount that they're trying to collect, including interest, fees, etc. They can't have any of this information missing because then your argument is, well, how do I know what you're collecting is the right amount, right? Or how do you know that I owe this debt if you don't even have a contract of me owing this debt, right? And there's different types of documentation that's required for different types of debt, right? Something like an eviction or unpaid fees from an apartment are going to be very different than medical bills or old credit card debt, for example. So there's a lot of protections for you as a consumer that you just might not be aware of. And that's what the experts are here for, right? Is to sift through that 274 pages of boring law in the Fair Credit Reporting Act. Actually, I think it's more pages now because they just edited it, but last time I read it. So, okay. So it is very possible to remove that negative information. So as you're removing that negative information, the other thing that you're doing is working on the rebuilding side. So how do you fix your credit? You have 2 options. You can do it yourself or you can hire a professional. So if you're doing it yourself, we have the option called Credit Score Pro. And then if you want to hire a professional, the full service option is through hiring my team at Incite Strategies. And essentially, we're going to communicate on your behalf with the creditors, collection companies, credit bureaus. So let's look at.
One thing I want to mention really quick, and I know we only have about 4 minutes, and we want to be
that's why
really
I was
respectful
speeding.
of your guys' time tonight. And we can definitely do this again. But one thing I did want to mention is, if we do a soft pull credit and it looks like we might be able to benefit from, working with Ivory, she always does a complimentary consultation, which is amazing. So she will go through this with you and, offer the tools and support that she thinks you might need. And if she thinks you're a good candidate for, full credit repair, she'll be honest with you. If she thinks you can do it yourself or she can give you some, just free tips that you can just do easily. She is honestly 9 times out of 10, she's like, listen, you can do this yourself. So I've really appreciated working with Ivory and her team. She's not just trying to get everybody involved in credit repair and just waste your money and your time, which a lot of credit repair companies have done. And I've worked with several of them over the years. So that's a really important distinction. And you can feel really safe working with her, or, if you're, or sending your clients to her. I certainly do.
Well, I appreciate that, Kahren. So if you do want to do it yourself, or you just don't want someone to look at it, or budgeting wise, Credit Score Pro is your most cost-effective option. The AI reads your credit report. It's read over 80,000 credit reports. It's got an extremely high success rate of 80% removals in the 4th month. The nice thing is it's just a couple buttons. So the image on the screen, you click create dispute letter, you check mark the accounts you want to dispute. It's automatically going to suggest the dispute item. The AI knows what the best item is. You click save, and then you can either print it and mail it yourself, or you can click another button to have a mail service mail it for you. And that's it.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's really awesome.
And then it will also create the AI customized action plan. So that's going to be what's not on your credit report and what should you add, right? The rental payment history, utility bills, all that kind of stuff. And then how should you effectively manage your credit cards? Exactly how much should you be paying on your credit cards for a score boost, right? What are the other ways you can improve your scores outside of removing negative information? It has the credit monitoring. It's very easy to use. So if you're interested, check it out, creditscorepro.ai. It is AI.ai. If you just go to creditscorepro.com, you're going to go to a UK website. That is not us. So, oh, it's right here. So does the credit building, oh, I forgot to mention, it does have full credit coaching as well. So if you still want to make sure you're getting an education, there are 30 to 40 videos on there on credit as well. So
many resources.
And then also, if you just want support, there is a Facebook group where you can go Credit Score Pro, the AI Credit Revolution. So we got people on there just sharing their credit journeys, asking credit questions. So, okay. If you want the full service route, we do a free consultation. So no obligation. We're happy to do free consultation, even if you want to do it yourself, just to make sure you have a good understanding of your report and how to approach things. Remember, not an inquiry for us to look at your credit because and same for Credit Score Pro, because you are not applying for debt. They're permanent solutions, not temporary fixes. So we don't play in the game of a temporary fix to get a loan. It's all permanent. We like to help you avoid paying collections. Like I'd said, over $1 million last year. We hope to get 2 million this year. And then I just want to try to hurry. Oh, okay. So the other thing is too, if you're working with us full service, Kahren has access to see your progress along the way. That way, the second you can apply for the mortgage, she is ready to go. She's like, look, I know what's going on with your credit. We can do the application today, and then you can start shopping with Tegan and her team and find the house. And then we do the credit reestablishment planning as well, but there is a client portal for full transparency. So you can see exactly what we're doing. Transparency is really important in this industry. We do want to make sure you know what's happening. So that's it. That's my spiel. So here's our contact information.
And if anybody has any questions, we can, we have more time, but we just wanted to be we appreciate everybody spending their evening with us. So we wanted to make sure we got you out of here because you committed to an hour and we didn't want to take more of your time, but we can do this again. We could talk about this for hours, and there's so many different, it changes all the time. And then there's so many different components that come into it. Everyone's credit is like their fingerprint. It's totally personalized and personal, and unique.
Yeah, we're long-winded, so we appreciate appreciate you all working with us there. But yeah, please, if you do have questions, you can type them in the chat, and or you can just unmute yourself and ask away, whether it's something we talked about during this presentation or not, or if you have suggestions for the next one, let me know.